The FBI deals with some of the most dangerous criminals and some of the strangest cases in law enforcement. Some FBI investigations have been known to cross international borders and involve criminals that deal in cybercrime, kidnappings, burglaries, unexplained phenomena, forensic evidence, and many other types of criminal activity. But even the most seasoned FBI investigators can sometimes be surprised by the unexpected outcome of an FBI case. Number 5. In 1988, 73-year-old Anne-Laure Hearin was married to Robert Hearin, one of the most successful businessmen in Mississippi at the time. On the 26th of July, she'd had a few of her friends over to play bridge when Robert got home from work, but she wasn't home. He contacted her friends and family to find out if they knew where she'd been, but decided to contact the police when they told him that they had no idea where she could be, and he filed a missing person report. He then found a note by his front door demanding that he pay a ransom to 12 franchise owners at a company called School Pictures, where he once served as president. In a bid to collect debts, these 12 people had been sued by School Pictures between 1981 and 1983, causing them to suffer damages. The note stated that he shouldn't call the police, but he'd already done so before finding it. And FBI Special Agent Wayne R. Taylor realized that Annie's abduction had some link to Robert's businesses. Investigators traveled to their home and found forensic evidence on the note and on the carpet. It would later be found that it belonged to Annie. Witnesses also told investigators that they saw a strange white van with Florida plates driving around the neighborhood. Letters were sent to the 12 people mentioned in the ransom note, but only a few replied, saying that they didn't want anything from Robert. 8 days after Robert and his son held a press conference asking for Annie's return, they received another note, this time in Annie's handwriting. Robert decided to find out how much financial damage the 12 franchise owners had suffered, and after doing so, he sent out checks totaling close to $1 million, half of which were returned. The kidnappers never made contact again, and investigators had no more leads to go on. But then, an anonymous caller informed them to look further into a man named Newton Alfred Wynn, one of the franchise owners. It was found that weeks earlier, he'd purchased a van similar to the one seen in the neighborhood that day. He had also asked his paralegal to supply him with an alibi for that day, and he had his ex-girlfriend fly to Florida to mail the written letter in Annie's handwriting. Wynn was arrested and received a 19-year prison sentence behind bars. He maintained that he was innocent, and to this day, Annie has never been found, and her fate remains an unsolved FBI mystery. Number 4. The FBI case of an Arizona armed car robbery occurred on the 24th of May, 1977. On that day, Russell Dempsey and Cecil Newkirk were working as drivers for Purolator Courier, transporting $330,000 when they were pulled over by a police car on Interstate 17. When the two men didn't arrive at their first stop at a bank in Prescott, FBI agents believed that they may have taken off with the money, that they'd been hijacked, or that one of the men had stolen the money and fled. The next day, a helicopter search team found the van by the side of the road in Bumblebee, approximately 55 miles from Phoenix. But neither Dempsey nor Newkirk was with the van, and the money, save for a few bags of coins, was also missing. In the back of the van, they found biological material indicating that a struggle had taken place. When they found a second set of tire tracks, agents knew that someone else was involved in the guards' disappearances. A couple who'd been driving on the I-17 told them that they saw a Purolator van being pulled over by a police car. But when they checked with the local police, they were told that no one in the department had made such a stop that day. Both Dempsey and Newkirk's bodies would later be found in canvas bags in River Mead, and FBI Special Agent Laird Highstand interviewed gas station employees in that area. He was told by one garage attendant that he'd been called to the lake on the 25th of May, when a man named Michael Pollan's truck got stuck after it had been backed up into the water. 24-hour surveillance was set up on Pollan and his brother, Patrick, and investigators noticed that they were spending money on new cars despite not having jobs. Agents found the makers of the canvas bags and learned that the brothers had purchased from them. They also found cement in the pickup truck that matched cement found in the canvas bags. The Pollans were arrested, and their wives told investigators that the brothers had been planning the robbery for months. They were each sentenced to 99 years in prison for the robbery and kidnapping, but received the death penalty for the guards passing. Number 3. On the 12th of September, 1997, an FBI investigation was launched into the biggest cash robbery in the history of the United States. 6 men were involved in the robbery of the Dunbar Armored Facility in Los Angeles, and they made off with a total of $18.9 million. Since there was very little evidence left behind, investigators had no way of knowing that the robbery had been orchestrated by Alan Pace 111, who'd been fired from the facility the previous day after it was discovered that he'd been tampering with company vehicles. He recruited 5 of his friends to assist in the heist. They were Eric Damon Boyd, Eugene Lamar Hill Jr., Freddie Lynn McCrary Jr., Terry Wayne Brown Sr., and Thomas Lee Johnson. On the night of the robbery, they went to a house party in order to establish an alibi, and then traveled to Dunbar, where Pace used his keys to enter the building. He had knowledge of the security systems in the building and timed it so that they would not be detected. They then ambushed the guards as they took their respective lunch breaks in the cafeteria. Pace also knew that the vault would be left open, as it usually was on Friday nights due to large sums of money being deposited. The heist took just 30 minutes and not a single shot was fired. The money was loaded onto a U-Haul truck, and they stole the recordings from the security cameras before returning to the house party. They'd seemingly gotten away with the crime, but 2 years later, Hill made a mistake when he gave a friend of his, who was a real estate broker, a stack of money that was still bound in the original currency straps. The friend contacted the police, Hill was arrested, and he soon named his fellow robbers. Pace received a 24-year sentence. Boyd was sentenced to 17 years, and the remaining 4 men received between 8 and 10 years behind bars. Number 2. David Wilkie's parents separated when he was just 3 months old, and he moved with his mother to Florida from Norfolk. When he turned 17, he left home to look for his father, but was unsuccessful in tracking him down. He then decided to move to Charlotte to live with his father's cousin, and here he met David Lee Fisher in 1982, aged 18, and the two became friends. David moved into Fisher's apartment and occasionally did some work for it. Fisher devised a scheme whereby David would date a woman called Bonnie Jones. Fisher would then take an insurance policy out on her life, and David was to end her life so that they could claim the proceeds from the policy. But the plan didn't work, as David fell in love with Bonnie, and the couple planned to move to Florida, where they wanted to get married in December of 1983. But before they left, Fisher, his ex-wife's son, Jody, David, and a man named Bobby Mulligan went on a hunting trip on the opening day of deer season in Virginia. While looking through the woods, David spotted a deer and ran after it, with Mulligan and Fisher following close behind. Mulligan took aim and fired, but he hit David in the back. Fisher yelled loudly for Jody to get help, but before he could get back, David passed away. Fisher and Mulligan told Bedford County officers that Mulligan had slipped and discharged his weapon accidentally, and the incident was considered to be a hunting accident. Fisher and Mulligan were charged with misdemeanors, but they were ultimately fined and released. Just 2 days after their release, Fisher had filed a claim on a $100,000 insurance policy that he had taken out on David's life, but the company was reluctant to pay out after their attorney found inconsistencies between the two men's statements and the autopsy report. Fisher agreed to a payout of $25,000 and paid $7,000 to Mulligan, who stayed in Charlotte for a few months before moving to South Carolina. Here, he had a nervous breakdown and confessed to his parents what he and Fisher had done. Both men were taken into custody by FBI investigators, and Mulligan gave a full confession. At their trial, he testified against Fisher, along with Gerald Stedham, who'd been approached by Fisher to end Mulligan's life. Unbeknownst to him, Stedham had contacted the FBI, who then monitored their meetings. He divulged incriminating evidence which was then used against him at his trial, and he received the death penalty. Number 1. On the 11th of January, 1982, 42-year-old George Gwaltney, a California Highway Patrol officer, radioed that he had found the body of a woman on a deserted stretch of Interstate 15, about 30 miles from Barstow in California. He reported that it looked as though she had ended her own life with a firearm, but the investigating detective noted that she'd been shot from behind. Her body was some distance away from her car, and the vehicle had no mechanical issues that would force her to stop in that area. The woman was identified as Robin Bishop, a 23-year-old aspiring actress who was on her way to Los Angeles to try and start her acting career. She had decided to stop in Barstow to get something to eat and to check in with her mother, but she was never heard from again. Police thought that it was possible that someone posing as a police officer had pulled her over and asked her to step out of her vehicle since there were handcuff marks on her wrists. There were no signs of a struggle, but since Robin's license and registration papers were at the top of her purse, as if they'd been presented to an officer, the theory seemed to fit. Officers who'd been working in that area that day were asked to present their service firearms for ballistic testing, and they all did so except for Gwaltney, who stated that his firearm had been stolen. He was given a polygraph test by his own request. He passed, but he was still under suspicion. After 7 months of investigation, there was no evidence linking anyone to the crime. But when an FBI investigation found new ballistic and fiber evidence, Gwaltney was charged and ultimately sentenced to 90 years in prison. He would be eligible for parole after 30 years, but he passed away in federal custody in 1997. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knots, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.